Have you ever loved someone who never really grew up? Maybe he was the one who lit up every room with his charisma, his spontaneity, his dreams that always felt just one step away from becoming reality. He talks about his purpose like a prophet, his next project like it's the thing that will change everything. He knows the right books to quote, the right words to say. He tells you he's different. The system doesn't understand that he was born for something greater, and for a while, you believe him. He's magnetic, brilliant, passionate, the kind of man who makes you feel alive just by being around him. But then you start to notice he never finishes what he starts. He can't hold down a job. He jumps from one idea to the next, always preparing, never arriving. He speaks of love but avoids commitment. He fears boredom more than failure. He craves admiration but shuns responsibility. He says he's searching for freedom. But what if he's not? What if the truth is more painful? What if he's not chasing freedom, but running from reality? Carl Jung called this the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, an archetype that lives in countless men who refuse the psychological passage into adulthood. Men who stay suspended between dreams and action, always waiting for the right moment that never comes. They wear the mask of rebellion, but underneath is fear. Fear of being ordinary, of making mistakes, of growing up. And maybe the hardest part is that you still love him. You still hope he'll change. That one day, he'll wake up and step into the man you know he could be. But what if he doesn't? What if the boy inside has taken over the whole man? This is not just a story about him. It's a reflection for all of us. Because sometimes the most dangerous form of immaturity is the one dressed in potential. And until we're brave enough to name it, we remain trapped, waiting, hoping, bleeding quietly behind the scenes. In this video, we're not here to judge. We're here to see. And that alone might just be the first step toward freedom. Real freedom. There's a name for this pattern. A psychological blueprint described by Carl Jung as the Puer Aeternus, Latin for eternal boy. At first glance, it might seem like a harmless metaphor, a poetic way to describe a man who still carries the spark of youth. But Jung wasn't romanticizing anything. He was warning us. The Puer Aeternus is not simply a man who refuses to grow up. He is someone whose very identity depends on staying unanchored, unformed, and uncommitted. He lives in a suspended state, always between what he could become and what he never dares to be. And unlike childish behavior, which is obvious and visible, the Puer's immaturity wears the mask of genius, creativity, and spiritual awakening. He might even look like he's evolving, but he isn't. He's orbiting his potential, never landing. Jung observed this archetype in countless patients, and perhaps you've seen it too. Maybe in someone close to you, or maybe in the mirror. The man-child avoids structure like it's poison. He refuses limits. Responsibility terrifies him. Routine suffocates him. He will say that he wants to be free, but in reality, he fears the weight of being accountable for himself, for others, for a life built on action rather than imagination. He prefers to idealize a world that exists only in theory, the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect moment. And when the world doesn't align with that fantasy, he blames it. The system is corrupt. People are fake. The world isn't ready for him. But here's what Jung saw. This isn't just immaturity. It's a refusal of the soul to incarnate into reality. The Puer doesn't just resist adulthood. He resists embodiment. He resists grounding. He resists being here. And it's not just him who pays the price. The people around him suffer the slow erosion of trust, reliability, and intimacy. Lovers are left waiting. Parents are left frustrated. Friends are left confused. He's the man who talks about starting a business, writing a book, and moving to a new city, but who never packs a single box. He's the man who speaks of deep love, then disappears when it's time to show up. To love a Puer is to love a shadow. Beautiful, yes, poetic even, but try to hold him, and he vanishes. And maybe you've seen this man not just in others, but in yourself. Do you constantly chase the next idea, the next thrill, the next alignment before taking action? Do you idealize freedom so much that commitment feels like betrayal? Do you blame the world, the timing, the circumstances, while refusing to confront the fear of your own inadequacy? These questions aren't meant to shame you, they're meant to wake you up. Because here's the truth Jung wanted us to see. Real freedom is not the absence of boundaries. It is the capacity to choose what's worth committing to. The pure doesn't choose. He floats. He delays. He escapes. And in that constant escape, he surrenders his power without realizing it. Power doesn't come from imagining a better future. It comes from planting yourself in the present and acting from it. The eternal boy does not fail because he lacks talent. On the contrary, many pupils are exceptionally gifted, intelligent, creative, emotionally sensitive, and that's what makes it so tragic. Their light is real, their soul is alive, but they remain unformed because they are unwilling to suffer the transformation that maturity requires. Jung was clear. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Growth demands sacrifice, the death of illusions, the collapse of childhood fantasies, the willingness to be seen not as perfect, but as human. And yet, many choose not to face this. They remain in psychic limbo, playing the role of the misunderstood genius or the free spirit. But deep down, they know. They know they're running. They know they're stuck. They know that their freedom is an illusion built on the fear of failure, the terror of being ordinary, the dread of being responsible for their own choices. So what do? They hide, behind charm, behind wit, behind dreams. They turn every confrontation into a philosophical debate. They turn every broken promise into a poetic excuse. They seduce you with vulnerability, only to withdraw when it becomes real. They are allergic to grounded love. Because love demands presence, it demands showing up. And the pure can't show up, not yet. Because showing up means facing his own shadow. It means seeing the ways he has avoided life, not because he couldn't handle it, but because he never believed he was enough to face it. So Jung invites us to go deeper, to ask not just what the pure avoids, but why. Why is reality so threatening? Why is adulthood so unbearable? The answer lies in the boy's belief that if he commits, if he roots, he will lose his essence. That responsibility will crush his soul. Those limits will extinguish his fire. But this is the greatest illusion of all, because it is not commitment that kills creativity, it is avoidance. The man-child is not preserving his light, he is burying it. The true path of individuation, the psychological and spiritual journey toward wholeness, requires us to confront the pure within, not to destroy him, but to transform him, to move from fantasy to formation, from drifting to deciding, from potential to presence. And that's where your choice begins. Maybe you've been stuck in this cycle. Maybe you've been in love with someone who's in it. Either way, you are not powerless, you are not broken, but you are at a crossroads. You can continue orbiting the life you dream of, or you can land. You can let the eternal boy run the show, or you can step into the man you were always meant to be. Because the world doesn't need more men lost in their heads. It needs men who are brave enough to descend into their hearts, build from the ground up, and live, not as fantasies, but as full, flawed, and fiercely present human beings. Carl Jung warned us with chilling clarity, what we do not confront in ourselves, we meet as fate. And this is perhaps most devastatingly true in the case of the eternal boy, the Puer Aeternus. For when he refuses to grow, when he avoids responsibility, when he denies his need to transform, he doesn't stay innocent. He becomes destructive, not in grand violent outbursts, but in slow, suffocating emotional erosion. He becomes the tyrannical child, and this tyrant, hidden under layers of charm and poetic language, quietly wrecks everything he touches. It starts with enchantment. He is captivating, lively, imaginative, the kind of man who speaks in metaphors and dreams in full color. He carries the presence of someone destined for greatness, a man seemingly born for something beyond the ordinary. And for a while, you believe him, because he believes himself. But over time, the charm frays. He begins to miss deadlines. He flakes on commitments. He changes plans last minute, disappears when things get hard, and reappears only when the emotional consequences have settled, if at all. Each time, he has an excuse, a poetic, spiritual-sounding reason for why things didn't work out. It wasn't the right energy. He wasn't ready. He felt cold elsewhere. And every time, you want to believe him. You want to believe that this time he means it, that this time he'll show up. But he never does. He avoids responsibility like it's a death sentence. He calls it freedom, but it's really just fear. He's not free. He's running. Running from the weight of being accountable, from the risk of failing, from the painful confrontation with his own limitations. And the longer he runs, the more elaborate his shadow becomes. This is not a man avoiding a paycheck or a relationship. This is a soul avoiding embodiment. Jung described this archetype as a psychic force that clings to the paradise of childhood, a state of being where everything is cared for, everything is forgiven, and nothing must be faced alone. The puer remains psychologically fused to a fantasy mother, whether literal or symbolic, who absorbs the burden of reality for him. And as long as he avoids the rupture of that bond, he remains unformed. His shadow grows stronger. And here's where it gets painful, because he doesn't just hurt himself, he drains everyone around him. Romantic partners find themselves emotionally bankrupt. They fall in love with his essence, his vision, the raw potential he radiates. But love requires presence, and the pure cannot be present, not consistently, not deeply. He disappears when love demands responsibility. He becomes unreliable when life requires structure. He says he wants connection, but what he really wants is adoration without accountability. This is how the shadow works. It seduces and then withdraws. It promises and then flees. It creates a cycle of hope and disappointment so subtle that you start to question your own expectations. Maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I should be more patient. Maybe he's just overwhelmed. But he is not overwhelmed. He is emotionally undeveloped. And the shadow keeps him there. The pure doesn't grow because growing requires confrontation. With time, with suffering, with failure. And his entire identity is wrapped in the illusion that he is too special to fail. Too enlightened to be ordinary. Too soulful to be consistent. And so he floats between dreams and reality, between intention and action, between adulthood and an extended adolescence that quietly metastasizes into decay. Carl Jung saw this pattern in myths, patience, and cultural archetypes. The child hero who never returns home. The son of the gods who refuses to inherit the world. The man who waits his whole life to begin. And every time he is confronted with real life, with deadlines, with conflict, with compromise, he disassociates. Not physically, but psychically. He vanishes into ideas, abstractions, and distractions. And what's tragic is how often this behavior is mistaken for sensitivity. He seems deep, introspective, and spiritual. But depth is not the same as maturity. Sensitivity is not the same as integrity. You can be emotionally intelligent and still emotionally irresponsible. And the eternal boy is the master of that illusion. He will speak about shadow work, about trauma, about consciousness, while avoiding a basic conversation about his own behavior. This is the paradox of the shadow. It hides inside the very qualities we admire. It's not loud, it's subtle. It's not malicious, it's evasive. It doesn't say, "I won't grow up." It says, "I'm still healing." And it sounds so believable that you ignore the red flags. You give him space. You carry the burden of the relationship. You downplay your own needs. Until one day you realize you've been loving someone who is emotionally absent, and perhaps even more painfully, someone who wants you to parent him more than partner with him. The shadow of the pure is symbiotic. It thrives on being enabled. There's often a caregiver figure, mother, partner, therapist, Friend who becomes emotionally entangled in his avoidance. They mean well, they want to help, but help, in this case, often becomes a form of emotional codependence. Because every time you rescue the eternal boy from the consequences of his own avoidance, you prevent the very pain that would force him to change. Jung said, "We don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this shadow, this darkness, must be made conscious. Otherwise, it will continue to destroy from within." But shadow work is not romantic, it is brutal. It requires admitting that your greatest enemy may be the version of yourself you've been protecting. It demands the collapse of false narratives. It forces you to reckon with the fact that potential, left unacted upon, becomes poison. The eternal boy is full of potential, but he fears embodiment. He lives in the when, not the now. And as long as he waits for the perfect moment, the perfect partner, the perfect job, the perfect inspiration, he remains a ghost. Alive but not living. Loved but not loving. Surrounded but utterly alone. So what happens if he doesn't wake up? He ages but never matures. He becomes the tragic figure of wasted potential. The man who speaks with passion but cannot pay his bills. The lover who writes poetry but cannot hold your hand when you need him. The father who vanishes when it's time to show up. He becomes, quite literally, a shadow of the man he could have been. But if he dares to confront the boy within, something else becomes possible. Because the shadow, when integrated, becomes strength. The child within, when no longer in control, becomes a source of vision, creativity, and renewal. The man learns to carry the boy, not be carried by him. He stops fleeing and starts building. He stops performing and starts participating. He stops waiting and starts choosing. This is not the death of the child. It is the rebirth of man. A man who can still dream, but now he builds. A man who can still feel, but now he shows up. A man who can still seek freedom, but now he chooses what is worthy of it. Carl Jung wrote that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is a psychic birth. And like any birth, it comes with pain, with blood, with the shedding of illusions. But only through that pain do we earn our adulthood, not as a burden, but as a source of power. The eternal boy is not your enemy, but if left unchecked, he will sabotage every good thing in your life. So now, the question is no longer about him, it's about you. Will you keep feeding the boy's fear? Or will you finally answer the man's call? Because if you don't confront the shadow, it will run your life, and you will call it destiny. But it was always your choice. Carl Jung introduced us to many archetypes of the human psyche, but none are as deeply formative or as quietly entangling as the figure of the Great Mother. She is at once nurturing and devouring, the giver of life and the preventer of individuation. In the story of the eternal boy, or Puer Aeternus, she is often the hidden force behind his refusal to grow up. Because while the boy appears to be running from responsibility, what he is actually doing is staying tethered to the comfort, safety, and psychic nourishment of the symbolic mother. In Jungian psychology, the Great Mother is not just a literal mother, she is a psychic image. An internalized figure who lives in the unconscious mind, shaping how we perceive care, security, and our place in the world. For some men, especially those with unresolved early attachments, this figure becomes a dominant inner presence. She protects them, soothes them, but also prevents them from ever truly leaving the womb of childhood. This is the root of the mother complex. When the Puer Aeternus is under the spell of this archetype, he does not seek partnership. He seeks protection, not from the dangers of the world, but from the pain of growing, from the demands of individuation, from the psychological death required to become a man. And in this arrested state of development, he unconsciously recreates the conditions of childhood in every adult relationship he enters. He doesn't want a partner. He's looking for a mother in disguise. At first, this is invisible. It looks like romantic chemistry. He gravitates toward women who are nurturing, emotionally attuned, and often empathetic to a fault. He is drawn to their strength, their capacity to understand him, to forgive him, to hold emotional space for his wounds, and they in turn are drawn to his sensitivity, his depth, his apparent vulnerability. But slowly, the roles start to shift. She begins to carry more of the emotional labor. She becomes the one who initiates, reminds, and forgives. He, on the other hand, remains passive. He expresses feelings, yes, but rarely takes action. He might share his pain, but he avoids responsibility for how it affects others. And as the relationship deepens, so does the imbalance. She becomes the emotional container. He becomes the emotional child. And this dynamic is rarely conscious. The Puer doesn't say, "Take care of me." He simply is someone who needs care. And the partner, whether a girlfriend, wife, or even a therapist, is often someone who has been conditioned to provide it, especially if she has her own unexamined patterns of overfunctioning or codependency. And so the cycle begins. The eternal boy expresses his needs, and the symbolic mother steps in. She wants to help. She sees his pain. She believes in his potential. But slowly, she realizes she's doing all the work. He dreams, she plans. He talks, she listens. He disappears, she waits. And in the background of all of this, the archetype of the great mother continues to whisper, "He's not ready. He just needs more time. He's special. You're the only one who understands him." But here's the truth. As long as he is being mothered, he will not grow. Jung was explicit about this. He said that the greatest tragedy of the Puer is when the mother refuses to let the child be born psychologically. Meaning, his body may age, but his psyche remains fused to the safety of dependency. He cannot make decisions without guilt. He cannot commit without fear. He cannot build, because building requires separating from the one who once carried him. And so he stays in emotional limbo, half man, half boy, and the relationship suffers deeply. The partner begins to feel unseen, unmet. She longs for reciprocity, for leadership, for the presence of a man, not a dependent child. But every time she tries to pull away, he reacts not with anger, but with despair. He clings, not to dominate, but because he genuinely doesn't know how to exist without her support. This is the hidden danger of the mother complex. It looks like love, but it's built on emotional dependence, and it goes beyond romantic relationships. Many eternal boys also remain entangled with their literal mothers, never fully separating, never confronting unresolved childhood dynamics. Their decisions are still influenced by maternal expectations. Their fears are often rooted in the terror of disappointing the mother figure. Even when physically distant, the psychological umbilical cord remains intact. And until that cord is cut, no real individuation is possible. But cutting that cord is brutal. It means confronting guilt. It means stepping into a kind of internal aloneness that feels unbearable to the boy within. It requires grieving the fantasy of unconditional care. And it demands facing the truth that growing up will feel, at times, like betrayal. Because that's what individuation is. The betrayal of the inner child's longing to be protected forever. But it's also the only path to freedom. Freedom not from responsibility, but through it. Freedom not from the feminine, but into a conscious, reciprocal relationship with it. No longer as mother and child, but as two whole beings who can meet each other fully. Jung wrote, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. And this inferno, for the eternal boy, is the fire of separation. The burning pain of becoming his own person, of standing on his own psychic feet. Only then can the archetype of the mother shift. No longer the devouring great mother, but the integrated feminine, the anima, who brings intuition, soul, compassion, without infantilizing. And only then can the man truly love. Because until then, what he calls love is still a negotiation for safety, not a commitment to mutual growth." So what does this mean for us? It means looking at our relationships, not just who we love, but how we love. Are we nurturing growth or enabling avoidance? Are we offering empathy or absorbing someone else's emotional debt? Are we holding space or carrying someone who refuses to stand? These are not easy questions, but they are essential, because unless we confront the mother complex, we remain trapped in longing, in imbalance, in emotional stagnation. The eternal boy will continue to dream, and the symbolic mother will continue to wait. But life will pass, years will vanish, and neither will be free. The solution is not to stop loving. It's to love with boundaries, to love with eyes open, to recognize the boy in the man and invite him to rise. Not with resentment, but with resolve. Because until he separates from the mother, he will never become the father, the one who can create, protect, and build. And until then, all his dreams will remain just that, dreams. Carl Jung said it plainly: individuation is a psychic birth, and like any birth, it comes with blood and pain. This is not just poetic, it's a biological truth for the soul. Becoming who you really are is not a process of gentle unfolding. It is a rupture, a tearing away from illusions, dependencies, and fantasies that once kept you safe. And perhaps no illusion is more seductive than the idea that you're simply not ready yet. Let's be honest. You're not waiting for the right moment. You're avoiding it. Avoiding the grief of letting go of the child within. Avoiding the discomfort of accountability. Avoiding the truth that potential means nothing without action. You tell yourself you're still healing, still preparing, still gathering strength. But time keeps moving, and so does life. There is no perfect moment, no cosmic green light, no spiritual signal that tells you now you may begin. You begin when you choose to. When you stop running from discomfort and start walking through it, with eyes wide open and a spine straightened by responsibility. That's where the real freedom lives. Not in detachment, not in endless options, but in knowing what deserves your devotion. Real freedom is choosing discipline because your soul demands structure. Real maturity is making peace with the mundane because love, purpose, and legacy are built there. And real awakening is when you stop blaming your past, your parents, the world, and begin shaping the man you choose to become. So here's the truth. You don't need more time. You need more courage. The boy inside you will always live, but he is not meant to lead. It's time to take the reins. It's time to let him rest. Because the world doesn't need another man full of potential. It needs one who has finally decided to live. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, don't let it fade. Hit that like button to support the kind of content that dares to tell the truth. Subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey of awakening, shadow work, and real inner transformation. Because this isn't just about watching videos, it's about waking up. And I want to hear from you. What part of this video hit you the hardest? What insight shook something inside you? Drop it in the comments below. Your reflection might just be the mirror someone else needs. This is only the beginning. More truth, more depth, more freedom coming next. You ready?